Air conditioning is actually the sector that's expected to drive most of the growth of demand of electricity. In fact, 50% of the growth of electricity over the next 30 years is all going to be air conditioning.
Hello and welcome, Budri Gamawara from the Gadigal Lands here in Sydney. It's Startup 360. I'm Simon Thompson.
Editor of Startup Daily.
Yep, still. What about you? You still CEO of Fishburners?
I am, and I'm Magella Campbell.
Great to have you along. My gosh, we're halfway through October already.
Scary.
We're almost getting to that point where we should start counting down sleeps to Christmas. But we're not going to do that today. We are going to have one amazing guest again this week who wasn't a finalist in the Startup Daily Best in Tech Awards, but his co-founder, Ron Conry, co-founder of Conry Tech, was one of our inaugural Chief Technical Officer finalists. Brilliant man. We are going to get into air conditioning today, which is a mind-blowing subject once you know a little bit more about it. Sam Ringwaldt is joining us. He's the co-founder along with Ron. Just this week, and you can read about it on Startup Daily, they raised $3 million in seed funding for an idea that has the potential to halve your power bill on air conditioning. The way he thinks about air conditioning, which is something that is part of all of our lives, but we probably don't think too much about it, is absolutely transformative. So I know this is going to be a cracking conversation.
I can't wait to hear about him. I've been doing all my research and
You've been researching air conditioning?
I have, and I'm so excited. It's opened up a whole new world for me.
Does this mean that every page you pull up now is going to have Google ads all the way around it for air conditioners?
Well, I hope they're Sam's because they're the ones I'm interested in.
Well, they're the ones you want.
Exactly.
Because he has this incredible history over 25 years. And I'm thinking the last major innovation he did was about the time the Sydney Olympics were on, which was, this time 25 years ago. So there you go. And they're at it again. An amazing company. Busy week this week. Of course, The interesting news is the Cut-Through Venture report came out looking into startup funding for the September quarter. More than $1 billion raised, around about 116 deals done. The big one, of course, was Firmus Technologies, the Singapore-based data center company that's building in Tasmania.
It's been busy. Investors have been busy.
The numbers were kind of interesting and mixed. There was a fair focus, and Chris Gillings points this out in the report that he puts together, that there was a strong focus on hardware and certain sectors, but AI is where all the excitement and a little bit of froth and bubble is going on.
Mm-hmm. Still lingering. Well, I think it will for a long time, to be fair.
He made a really interesting point though, where he sort of says that when it comes to the Series A to Series B area, what happened in 2021 and 2022 is continuing to have an impact. And what he says is many startups that raised during that period remain constrained by early evaluations, while the 2024 cohort shows stronger fundamentals but early signs of renewed pricing pressure. Interesting thought there. And the other one that stood out, of course, and he does always take a look at this, female-led startups recorded their strongest quarter since early 2023, but total capital raised by female and mixed-gender teams fell to 11% of overall funding. Accelerator programs played a major role in maintaining representation, and I think they were nearly a third of the rounds that happened over the quarter. And yes, very strong from them in terms of backing women founders, which is good to see. But a really interesting mixed report, this one. Of course, Cut-Through Venture does do this quarterly now. This is the last one for this year. I suppose in January we'll hear how 2025 finished. And I think the number is $1.3 billion needs to be committed in the final December quarter for this to be the third best year on record. So 2021, 2022 are already on the podium.
Yeah.
But to top the last couple of years with 2025, 1.3 bill, I think it might happen.
Well, yeah, we're seeing this in Q3. It's probably likely that we'll probably get that same momentum in Q4.
Someone will come through on that one. Now, before we go any further, I do want to say that Startup Daily is supported by Vanta, helping startups unlock market opportunities through automated compliance. So thank you to them. And let's continue our Vanta banter. And I want to have a little bit of an environmental focus, given what we're going to be talking about with air conditioning, because Sam does see the business very much as a climate tech company, hardware, climate tech, and has some interesting points to make about it. But a couple of big things came out this week that I thought were interesting and people should know about. KPMG launched its annual Nature Positive Challenge to help grow eco-startups working in AI and the circular economy. $250,000 pool of bespoke consulting, tax and accounting services for 5 finalists to help scale up and grow their nature positive impact. $100,000 nature positive prize to be awarded to the winning venture by the judges, and a $20,000 one for anyone who wins the People's Choice. So it's open to all startups in Australia, Fiji and PNG. And there is a dedicated Australian First Nations category as well. So we've got that story up on startupdaily.net. You can click on the link there and enter that. Mm-hmm. And there's another cool one that was announced this week too.
It's the month for corporate innovation programs. But Asahi Beverages have their SIP Ventures, which is their corporate venture studio, and they've just launched a brand new partnership program, which is super exciting. They're offering $150K in equity-free funding to run a pilot. Anyone who's basically involved in improving or enhancing the experience of consuming beverages, or is that right? Actually, let me double check that wording because I think that's Sorry, so what did I say? I need to say. I want to say, and they're targeting any business that enhances how Asahi Beverages products are enjoyed or consumed, I suppose.
So what you're saying is if I put a straw in my beer, I could get $100,000 worth of non-dilutive funding?
I think it's more involved in anyone who basically works in like working with venues, working with retail, working in it's not supply chain, and it's not anything to do with actual food or beverages either. So not for this round, but it's pretty exciting. I think it's a really cool approach to, instead of just getting startups to work on some obscure innovation program, they're looking to partner directly, which I think is a really cool move.
And I'll just read one of the quotes from this. We're not looking to solve internal problems. We're looking for founders with proven traction who are ready to scale and partner deeply to accelerate their growth. The accelerator will focus on startups with strong commercial potential and positive social and environmental impact, key criteria for SIP Ventures. So that sounds exciting. Applications are open until October 31. I know the details are on the Fishburners website, and I've got them up on startupdaily.net as well.
That's great. That'll be really good.
Well,
should we get talking to Sam?
I want to talk air conditioning because it's a really cool subject.
I'm ready to triple my knowledge in it, so I'm so excited.
Don't go away. We'll be right back to talk with Sam Ringwaldt from Conry Tech.
Welcome back to Startup 360. We are here with Sam Ringwaldt from Conry Tech. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you.
Yay. And a big week for them. Congratulations, mate. Your first raise, which is great news, $3 million. I'm going to start with this, air conditioning. Seriously, startup, how does that work? How do you put those two things together? Because air conditioning is just air conditioning, isn't it?
Well, that's what everyone thinks, but sadly it's a topic that doesn't get enough attention, particularly in climate tech circles. What many people are shocked to learn is that air conditioning is responsible for about 15% of global emissions, so it's more than all cars and planes combined. And there's very little movement, very little tech being developed, and so we thought it was high time to turn it on its ear and redo it all again.
I did describe you as disruptors in the space this week. Tell us a little bit about what you're up to. And this is a wonderful company because your co-founder, Ron, who was one of the finalists in our Chief Technical Officer award a couple of years ago for Best in Tech, he's been doing it since basically air was invented. And you know, he probably knows everything there is to know. And here he is, after 60 years in the business, recreating a new way of doing air conditioning.
Yeah, well, the last tech we brought to market was about 25 years ago, the last major technological breakthrough. And the world is still considering that as the best technology. It now has about 60% global market share. It air conditions billions of square meters of buildings around the world. And yet there's been no sort of advance on that in 25 years. And so we thought it was time to go back to first principles and rethink it entirely. So Ron's entire career has been in this space. So he left school to become a refrigeration mechanic thinking he was going to fix fridges. He's never fixed a fridge in his life. But he has had a string of successive HVAC-related businesses and some other interesting diversions on the side here and there. but he has really reshaped modern HVAC. So, I consider him the father of modern air conditioning.
And the father of modern air conditioning, that's
a good title.
And we should explain to our viewers and listeners, HVAC is heating, ventilation, air conditioning.
Yes, correct.
For short.
Yeah. And for those out there that might be listening, sometimes we also generously add an R onto the end for the refrigeration guys as well, which are also important.
Inclusion.
HVACer.
Yeah. That's it.
Inclusive.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about why aircons, or like why this space is so overlooked in the climate industry. How come this is not getting as much attention as maybe the other areas?
It's a great question. I think partly it's that most people don't fundamentally understand how their air conditioning systems work. You know, they have a grasp on how their plumbing works, on how their electricity works, on why you would add a solar panel to a house. But the mysteries of the vapor compression cycle, how do you take heat from somewhere and move it somewhere else, and do that very efficiently, is sort of this mystery. And the industry has been self-governed, self-regulated. You know, it sets all of its own hurdles and benchmarks. If you look at any energy performance standard around the world, any government standard that tries to push the air conditioning industry to do something better, all of those standards have been set by the air conditioning manufacturers. I used to sit at those tables. I was the lonely voice in the back of the room saying, make it harder. And everyone would tell me to shut up because they couldn't do it. And so literally it would be go around the table. What do you have that can already do this? How efficient is it? Okay, let's advise the industry that is the gold standard or the platinum standard.
Let's set the bar about here because my hips are getting a bit dodgy.
That's right. I've already built that factory. I may as well keep selling that equipment. And so there hasn't been sort of any external pressure on the industry. It really ignores things. I mean, it's a very big, very costly industry. It's about $250 billion a year. It's been largely controlled by a handful of players for the better part of a century now. And so when we have brought tech to market in the past, we have been met with some fairly stern opposition.
Well, I want to go into this stern opposition because this is a story you recounted at Cicada by Tech 23 a month or so ago. I'm trying to figure out who's going to play, which James Bond will play you in the film version of this, but there's been a little bit of industrial espionage going on. Just share what happened with you guys.
Yes, we had the unfortunate privilege of experiencing what it looks like firsthand, physical espionage, if you like. And so we had engineers followed home in Australia and their laptops and keys and stuff stolen. We had our factories broken into and every filing cabinet removed and all of the engineers' computers removed. And then we thought we were all good. I mean, we had done all this, and then simultaneously, both in Canada and in Melbourne, we ended up getting ram raided, and they drove a car or a truck through our wall, ripped out our servers, ripped out every engineering computer, ripped out all our filing cabinets, ripped out every drawing they could find, left everything else, left the money, left the receptionist's computer, left everything else. And very unsubtly, this large American corporation who had been speaking to us for about 6 months about the technology suddenly went quiet. Until about 6 months later when they turned around and said, we've been working on something. Can we buy a test rig from you? So it was fairly obvious as to who had tried to get what through what. But fortunately, most of the real secrets were still in our heads, so it didn't get them very far.
That's kind of, it's almost like mafia level, really. When you're doing a ram raid, it's like, I had no idea that air conditioning was this savage. It's definitely not cricket, let me put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, there was probably less than 5 or 6 major players in the world that really dominated every market. I mean, if you went to any country in the world, the big 3 sort of shuffled who was number 1 in that market, but they were the big 3 in every country of the world. And we suddenly brought a tech to market that threatened to disrupt what they'd built for 80, 90 years. We had a technology in the compressor that Ron had developed that was significantly better than anything that they had. And they all had too much arrogance to buy from a startup. And so we had to find another way. And so we ended up pioneering a whole new raft of manufacturers around the world. My wife and I literally took this thing on a road in a mobile caravan around the US, going door to door. And over the space of a few years, we grew the industry from half a dozen manufacturers to about 80 or 90, which now service the world today.
It's an amazing story.
That's crazy. I am blown away that that's just, I mean, we get upset when people steal our content. Like, that's a whole new level of like ramming through doors.
More serious than scraping the website.
Yeah. I mean, tell us a little bit about that, I guess, like coming back from that experience. That would have been massive. I mean, where do you even begin?
Well, it's a good confirmation that you're on the right track.
The ultimate validation.
That's right. You know, you've got people worried. Look, it's been a fun journey overall. Like I've had the privilege of working with Ron in 2 of his ventures. He's done many more than that, which is why I insisted that we put his name on the door this time around. And so it's been quite fun. I really enjoy educating the market, you know, seeing products roll out, seeing the uptake, seeing the recognition, going from the starting points of like, who are you? What is this? Why would this even work? Of course, this is not going to work, to getting told by others, like, have you seen this thing? Like, this is amazing. And I'm like, yeah, I sort of know a bit about that. I remember I was in a trade show in China, one of the largest trade shows in our industry in the world each year. And some guys were really pitching me hard. I was walking around and found this booth of this manufacturer I'd never heard of that had recently started buying these compressors to put onto their equipment. And they're trying to tell me all about it and had quite an interesting version of the history. And so I sort of let it play out a bit. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Actually, I work very closely with the guy that made that thing. They're like, oh, because they had been trying to claim a fair bit of inventor privilege that they were not owed.
Yeah. So the 3 million seed round, and you got Climate Tech investor Odyssey involved. Tell us about that process and going through that, because you guys have been doing this for 5 years now, and you're pretty determined, pretty smart, and, you know, well funded from Ron's and your previous success. Why now? Why this point?
Well, we have had the entrepreneurial ups and downs. So yes, we have had very large exits. We also were not allowed to do air conditioning for 4 years after one of our previous exits. And we dabbled into the world of renewable power. Unbeknownst to us, the red tape and things that exist in that industry that make it difficult for everyone. And that certainly was a very costly learning exercise for us. So we were not as well funded as you might have assumed. So we have taken a little bit of money over the last 5 years here and there, but this is the first sort of major round. Bandera has been a good support for us over the last year. They put some money in last year, but this is sort of the big one. But Odyssey is it's really unique. They're really focused on climate tech hardware, things that really can move the needle away from fossil fuels and the associated consumption. And so they were a great partner for us. Also, they have a presence in Asia. But interestingly, they found me. One of the main partners of Odyssey, he has other family members that are involved in hotels and some other businesses as well. And they had been lamenting, I guess over dinner or something, about the costs that they were incurring with their air conditioning, with the frustration they were having of trying to find upgrades, with the huge amount of emissions that was caused by it. And so what does he do? He jumps on Google, searches for sustainable air conditioning startups, whatever, and up pops one of my pictures from Verge last year on YouTube, where we won the world's building product startup to watch last year in the US. And so he saw that and then cold contacted us via our website, and that was about 9 months ago, and we've built a relationship since then till this week.
Right, so tell me what's going on with Bull Ant, because the thing that did my head in is the idea, and I can imagine everyone's both thrilled and slightly terrified about the idea that you would halve power costs. But I also remember Twiggy Forrest, a year or so ago, talking about this and saying the world's going to get hotter, we're all going to use more air conditioning, and that's going to accelerate the whole problem, and the hotter it gets, the more air conditioning, the more energy, vicious cycle.
Yeah, it's a really vicious irony that the main solution that we're relying on to mitigate the change is also accelerating the change faster than nearly anything else. I mean, there's 864,000 new air conditioners being installed every day from now until 2050.
Nearly 1 million air conditioners a day.
A day, yeah. And so air conditioning is actually the sector that's expected to drive most of the growth of demand of electricity. In fact, 50% of the growth of electricity over the next 30 years is all going to be air conditioning. And we're talking about comfort here. We're not even talking about food chains, pharmaceuticals, all the other applications
keeping
of
your data
cold.
center cool.
Yeah.
So this is this is a massive problem that is accelerating. At 15% of global emissions now growing, we have to do something. And so in the past, our previous technologies have taken sort of the worst parts of an air conditioning system and made them better. And that's how we've had a lot of success, because they've made them significantly better. But we still were governed by basically how air conditioning was set up 100 years ago. And 100 years ago, the Iceman was still dropping off blocks of ice at a building. Water was melting off that ice. Fans were blowing across that water and getting distributed around a building. And Willis Carrier had the amazing idea of building a chiller that could get rid of the Iceman. And it was a great leap forward. It was like the introduction of the telephone. We made a better compressor 25 years ago. That was like the start of the mobile phones, if you like. But no one had really revisited this thing. And so we said, if we invent air conditioning today, how would we do it? Like, what would we start with? And fundamentally, I'm sure both of you and your listeners can also appreciate that. I'm sure you've all worked in buildings that at some point you were uncomfortable. You were too hot, too cold, the meeting room gets too stuffy. The way it's been delivered for 100 years rarely leaves everyone comfortable, and it consumes 60% of the building's power. And so we said, well, why don't we start there? Why don't we start with, how do we actually make people comfortable? So how do we deliver something different for you, Simon, than your colleagues in a different side of the building? How do we do that super efficiently? And we realized that if we brought it back to first principles of like, let's only deliver what is needed, where it's needed and when it's needed, then we could radically shift the formula here. We could radically shift the equation. And so we have then been developing up the hardware that will allow us to break up a building into much smaller fragments, roughly 4 or 5 zones per floor. So you could at least do the east and west differently than the north and south and the center, for example. You could do this floor that's occupied differently from the unoccupied floors around us. And that will allow us to significantly change the profile of electricity, of air conditioning, by only consuming just as much as we need to do and really delivering, for the first time in 100 years, variable temperatures that allow us to save a huge amount of energy. I
feel like that's genuinely so important. I cannot tell you the amount of aircon problems we've had running co-working spaces, and that is just massive, I have to say. In terms of, talking about acceleration and making sure that you're staying ahead of that curve, what are you doing as a leader to enable your team to be able to execute at that pace?
This is fundamentally why we have adopted venture funding. In the past, we've always skipped venture funding. We've sort of gone straight from bootstrap to private equity. And as nice as it is to sit through these seminars and talking heads that advocate strongly for every startup must be bootstrapped, there is a pace that you can achieve with venture that you can't achieve without it. And this is a massive problem. This is not getting any better, and more air conditioning systems are getting put in. Every 10 years, the building systems get replaced. If we don't address this quickly, then these problems are going to be hanging around for generations to come. And so one of the main ways we're helping our team accelerate is by pursuing venture funding, pursuing the right partners that would enable us to move faster. Because we've overcome really all the technical hurdles that we had in front of us over the last 5 years. And so now it's really a matter of engineering time, which is money, and starting to build our manufacturing capabilities, essentially. And so venture funding unlocks that ability for us to move faster in that space.
And do it before the next ram raid of your IP.
That's right.
Get some security in there.
We still keep it in our heads. Don't come ram raiding.
Most of the funding is going towards bollards.
That's right.
The Conry Tech side. Sam, what is it about being a startup founder that thrills you, that makes you jump out of bed every morning, aside from the fact that you live and literally breathe air conditioning?
It's fairly unparalleled in the continuous opportunity to learn. Even as you go into the next customer meeting or the next VC meeting or the next pitch, every single one is tailored. Every single conversation is slightly different. You can't predict the outcome of any conversation, much like this one now. And so having the ability to learn from people, what do they really care about? How do I make what we're doing resonate? How do I convince people that they actually have a problem that they need to look at? I find a lot of joy in that. I find a lot of joy in seeing, You may have noticed, for example, that I walked over to the windows just before we came into here to look out. What I'm looking for is where are my previous chillers, because most of these buildings in Sydney have our previous technology. And so that's a huge element of pride as well, of saying, oh, I've done that building, I air conditioned that building, I'm keeping those people comfortable. And knowing that we have this in store for us again in the future, where we can hope to really dominate globally again and go into every city in the world and provide solutions. That's really fun.
I kind of feel like, Steve Jobs gets a lot of credit for iPhones and stuff like that. It kind of feels like you are the Steve Jobs of air conditioning, and you've done this extraordinary thing, but very much an unsung hero, along with Ron, in terms of how you've transformed the built landscape.
Look, I'll happily let you label Ron in that way. I definitely am not that smart, but I do enjoy talking, and I do enjoy that conversation with people about why they should care and what solutions we can actually provide. Because I think there needs to be many, many shots on goal if we're going to seriously tackle these climate issues that are in front of us. So we have a great solution. We can halve a building's power. That's going to be radical in terms of how fast we can transition to a cleaner grid. But we need so many other solutions as well. And so I also enjoy being in the room to encourage other founders to, keep going, keep pushing on those doors that are closed. I've lost track of how many venture companies have refused to give us any money, both here in Australia and abroad. But you just got to be relentless, because you find people like Odyssey who your message resonates with, and then you have the right sort of partnership to move forward with.
I'm going to, I guess, dig a little deeper on that. I mean, when times are tough and, you're not getting the results that you wanted, or, you're getting turned away from the people who don't see the vision, rather than what's getting you out of bed at the point of when things are going well, how do you keep yourself going when those times are trailing on?
Look, I am quite deeply a man of faith. I'm a Christian, and I also am trying to do my best to restore creation or to preserve what God has created, what I believe God has created. And so that legacy for my children and for just doing the right thing is a huge driver as well. So irrespective of what financial success may or may not eventuate, this progress is progress that must be made, and maybe it's a torch that we end up passing along to someone else. Maybe there's an acquisition, maybe there's something else that happens down the track that can continue this journey, but these are problems that must be solved. And whilst I've got breath and life, then why not try?
Your wife is co-founder of Conry Tech as well. What's the board table like with you, Brenda, and Ron all together?
Look, we also have Jeremy from Bandera.
Yeah.
No, it's great. I mean, our first couple of years of marriage, actually, Brenda and I, that was when we set off on this journey to bring this new compressor technology to the world.
Yeah,
so
best honeymoon ever.
So that was some accelerated marriage training for sure, as we spent essentially 2 years on the road, 300 nights a year in hotels, driving from city to city every single day around the US. We quickly learned that we prepare PowerPoint slides from very different angles. I like to make a structure. She likes to start on slide one and build it out. We communicate quite differently, but when you've got literally tens of thousands of miles of road that you get to journey down, that's a great facilitator for good marital conversations, because you're looking at the road rather than each other. It's really quite helpful.
I thought you might bring up the bloke thing. We have the best conversations when we're not looking at someone, we're looking somewhere else, and driving gives you that excuse.
No, it's been good. So she has this phenomenal gift to really intuitively read people. And so she's been responsible over the last 25 years of really building the teams we've built around the world. So we have this little interview dance. I'm sort of giving it away for any future employees out there, where I really will look for the thumbs up under the table from Brenda to know whether we pursue this interview or whether we sort of start wrapping it up. And normally that comes very quickly. Within 3-4 questions, she's sort of already figured out, will they fit with the culture? Will they bring value? Will they add value to this team? Because we want every team member to be an innovator. It's not enough to have Ron, as brilliant as he is. We need everyone to be coming up with ideas. It needs to be a a spawning of ideas. This idea can gestate another idea, and so on and so on. And so she does a phenomenal job of managing people and identifying who's going to help us on that journey.
Well, I want just to follow up on that about culture. How does Brenda explain it to you, and how do you think about it in terms of getting the right people to fit?
I think we are blessed here in Australia that we have very flat hierarchies. We have collectively had something like 30 to 40 factories in a dozen countries around the world. We've worked with teams from all sorts of nationalities. And Australia is quite unique in that it's one of the few aspects of the good aspect of the disrespect for authority that we have in Australia from our convict past. But what it enables everyone to do is to say no and to say, I don't believe you, like prove it. And we've had so many conversations with even the engineers we put on who say, I don't think that can be done. And Ron is quite famous for saying, unless I believe it in my gut, then we're going to try anyway. And I saw that firsthand in some of our previous ventures where we actually did things which I found out later all of the textbooks said were impossible. In fact, I once had this top professor from the National Magnetics Laboratory in Florida visiting us, and I was walking him through this device that we'd built, and he was asking me these questions, and I was answering away. And he got to the end, he says, do you realize that you've done three separate things that are all impossible? I said, well, lucky we never read the textbook then. And so I think having that culturally where we encourage everyone to speak up. Some of our greatest cost and time savings in our past factories have been literally the guy who we get to come in the evening and sweep the factory floor up, coming into the CEO's office and saying, these guys are putting in that bolt in a really awkward way. Why don't you just move that hole over there? And suddenly it's like, why don't we? That's a great idea. Let's do that. And so if you have this expectation that everyone can contribute from the cleaner to the CEO, everyone should be looking for opportunities, looking for solutions. That's the culture that we're trying to build.
Wow.
I love that. I'm interested to know, raising a family as co-founders, husband and wife, what's that been like?
Look, we have 3 young budding entrepreneurs, which we love. Our kids have various buckets that they have to put their pocket money into. So one, they get to spend, and have various proclivities from chocolate to soft animals. But then they also have to allocate money for giving, for tithe, and also money for saving, and then a final bucket for invest. And so we encourage them to think about, how can I make this money make money? Or how can I make this money have some other good benefit? And so that's been really fascinating to watch their little minds work as well. So my daughter has access to a Cricut and makes amazing Christmas cards and birthday cards and sells those. My son bought himself a 3D printer and has been walking up and down the streets of our neighbourhood, going door to door, selling little fidgets and little printed toys and so on. My youngest son has now decided he wants in on that game, so he's bought himself a 3D printer and he's busy cranking out things for his next big stall. And so it's really fun. Getting to see them do that, also getting to, I guess, demonstrate that there's far more to life than just your job, than just what you're doing, and how much time we give to them and get involved in their school and participate in their sports and do where we can. I think that's also another benefit of being in Australia, frankly, is that we know how to work to live much better than some other cultures.
So I know you're keen to do a Series A next year, I think about 10 mil. So you're going to go to the kids and say, look, friends and family round, do you want in, guys?
Maybe in a few years. Yeah.
Hopefully by then their investments would have tripled. So
That's right.
That's good.
No, they get a better rate of pay than I do often when they're going door to door. So
I was going to say they'd probably give you a pretty tough term sheet anyway.
That's right.
I'm interested to get your take on the different phases of your business. Starting from the 0 to 1, where you're validating, testing, building, and then translating that into growth in the second half. What's that sort of process been like for you guys?
Look, we do have a marked advantage this time around because we have a lot of establish customer relationships and distributor relationships and supplier relationships that we didn't benefit from last time. And so that gives me access to the boardroom of big property groups and so on, which last time we had to really work hard on over several years to try and get that access. But we are planning, though, to really have a strong focus on the developing world in this space. And in the past, our technology has had a fairly hefty green premium, and so has largely been off the table for these developing countries, which is actually where the bulk of growth in air conditioning is going. India, for example, has less than 15% of their buildings air conditioned. Indonesia is similar. You've got countries like Nigeria that are growing exponentially fast, that really don't have any in-house solutions, but are getting hardest hit by hotter temperatures, hotter summers. And so adopting air conditioning is now no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. You know, it helps people study better, work more effectively, heal faster, sleep better. And so this luxury that we've had for long, that we've benefited from in Australia. Australia's always been one of the pioneering countries in air conditioning historically. So we've benefited from this for a long time, but there's many countries that haven't. And so we do have a overall goal and lens to really bring this technology to market cost effectively. In fact, at parity with some of the worst systems on the market is the aim. So that would really allow countries like India to adopt en masse and hopefully leapfrog 30, 40 years of bad technology that's going to exacerbate this energy growth. I mean, I really can see a future in which we can turn the clock back. You know, so even as we add all these million units a day, we can actually be doing it for less and less energy than we're currently using. And there's a unfortunate mindset that has begun to establish itself where we see renewables coming online. We see this year, for example, more renewables than coal for the first time for the first half of 2025 globally. We see the price of solar coming down. We see the price of batteries going down. And so a conversation I get into quite often with people is, why do you care about efficiency? Just make more power. But this power is not free. You know, the greenest kilowatt we can possibly spend is not the one we make from the sun or the one we get out of the earth or the one we get off the wave. It is the one we just don't use at all. And so there needs to be far more attention on what can we do about using less. And I really wish our government and governments around the world would get on board with that story, because their dollars could go so much further. For what they spend on a wind farm or a new solar establishment, they could quadruple the impact to the grid if they simply focused on energy efficiency instead.
Yeah.
Because as someone who's old enough to remember when we gold-plated the grid system in New South Wales, you end up paying in different ways. That infrastructure costs you an absolute bomb as well. I've saved the best for last. Bull ant. Come on. What's the goss? What's going on here? What's in the magic box? Small but mighty. What are you doing?
Yeah, look, it is a magic box. It's what we're aiming to build. So the bull ant is about the size of a esky, or for a cooler for our non-Australian friends.
Chili bin.
Yeah, or a chili bin for those across the ditch. It is designed to deliver roughly the needs for a quarter to a fifth of a typical floor. And so we can really start dialing in exactly what we needed. But it's an all-in-one solution. So hopefully either of you would be able to install this. I mean, if you can install a washing machine or a dishwasher, which is, can you hook up some hoses and a PowerPoint, then you'll largely be equipped to install our system. Because there is a sad decline in the global knowledge base of air conditioning and of many industries. I mean, we've really transitioned, sadly, from an era of repair to an era of replace. And we'd like to try and reverse that a little bit by not only making something that is repairable, but it is super easy to bring in, put in place, get installed by anyone, and then we can help you keep that running very long term for decades and decades.
Which again addresses a big challenge in developing countries around that technical skill and base that you need to service a sector like that.
Well, even for a building like this, the air conditioning gets replaced every 10 years or so, and it's quite the spectacle. It normally happens about 2 o'clock in the morning because you have helicopters hovering with huge things. You've got massive cranes shutting down streets, you know, and our solution will be able to be rolled in on a trolley with a couple of guys. And so even the ability to upgrade buildings, retrofit them, replace them, should be far faster, far easier, and far less costly than the.
But I'm
current way
also
of doing
thinking
things.
the bull ant is a quarter of the size of the air conditioning system I have sitting outside my house. It's like, how?
Look, there are other elements to it.
Have you done a shrinking ray gun? Sort of, taking this technology and just zip.
Well, we have worked very hard to make some micro tech in there that doesn't currently exist. So in addition to our patents that we already have, there's a number of other patents on the way. But there is other parts of the system. I mean, all of these bull ants, we still want to move energy around a building, not just deliver it effectively there. So if your room's too hot and your room's too cold, then why don't I take your heat and move it over there? And so I can do that around a whole building. And so there's pipe work, there's other elements to this system, as well as the small magic box that will comprise a whole system. But we believe it will be quite transformative to how air conditioning is done, and it has the potential to really unlock a new ecosystem of products that can really start tailoring things. I actually track every HVAC startup in the world, and in fact, there will be something on our website shortly with all of those startups in the world that I've found to date. If you are one, then please come and tell me your details, because there's a lot of solutions that are going to be necessary, and there's a lot of really great ideas out there in terms of better ways of optimizing, better ways of sensing who's in the room, better ways of determining what the right temperature even is. Some great guys in Australia doing things like that. And so if we can partner with them, if we can really now provide the lever for the first time, there's so many software and sensor solutions that really now tell you that you have a problem. Unfortunately, there's no lever you can pull to fix the problem. And so what we're really trying to do is create a lever that all of these other ecosystem can now start to utilize.
Wow.
I love that. That's great. I feel like the theme of the year has been collaborate, don't compete. So I feel like that's right on mark with that. My last question.
Absolutely.
If we were to bring you into the studio in 3 years' time, what do you want to be sitting in the chair celebrating?
Well, I'm a founder, so I have to measure my optimism with some realism here. Look, I think that we should certainly be in market. We should have a number of sites up and running, both in Australia and in near Asia, as well as in the US. But you do have to absolutely walk before you run. And so we have a very modest rollout plan because we need to build the infrastructure. We're trying to overturn a century of how things have been done. And so
you're ripping up the railroad tracks basically and changing the gauge size.
Exactly. And so we don't want to be stuck with a rocket that goes to space that's the size of a Roman chariot. We really want to be doing things different, from the procurement to the engineering to the installation. All of those things need to be different. And there's still a fair bit of work to do to really unlock this potential. And so hopefully we're celebrating that has been unlocked, that we've got buildings that are radically saving energy, that are not only saving energy but are really harnessing renewables and making us enabled to make that transition faster by using more renewables when they are on the grid and less dirty fuel later. And we're out there, we're rolling. Everyone knows about us by then, and the ram raids are long behind us.
And hopefully the podcast will spread the gospel a little bit further. Finally, I just want to ask, given the no's you were talking about from VCs before, and Australia especially, the mandate is often around software. What's the message you want to share with everyone about deep tech and hardware and why it's important?
Look, software is important. It can be developed quite quickly. It can shine a spotlight onto other problems quite fast. What it does quite poorly is do anything about those problems that it's highlighting. And so we need more solutions that are actually going to be the solution, and that takes things being built. We also need to take pride in building things locally where we can. I mean, I believe there is a future for Australian manufacturing in the high-tech space. I do not believe if you're a startup out there making a new toaster, Australia is probably not the best spot to build your toasters. But I think high-tech things like robots, like Andromeda, like what we're doing in high-tech air conditioning hardware, in
solar panels,
all those
Quantum.
sort of things. Yeah, there's so many opportunities. And it'll be great to see a new generation of Australians that know how to build things, because sadly, most of those generation are retiring or, are certainly not darkening the door of the office anymore.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen to Ron anytime soon. But Sam, great to have you on the show. Thanks for making air conditioning sexy again. That's, I think, been the theme of today's conversation. Thanks for joining us on Startup 360.
Thank you both.
Okay, so how are you staying chilled this weekend?
Oh, I am. If the weather's good, I might head to the beach. Might make the first one of the year. Is it too soon? I don't know.
No, absolutely. Time to go. The water's always cool because there's a couple of months lag in the temp. But I know my wife went swimming and it was a cracking time on the weekend on Sydney's northern beaches. I was at the Swannies game. The air conditioning came through late in the afternoon from the south and it was so strong it blew my beer over. So I lost half my beer. But it was a great win by the Swans women's team, catching up with a bunch of friends there. And I'm kind of feeling that footy, it's getting a bit hot for footy, but it was still just such a nice day. And they're playing again this weekend, so I'm excited about that. And then after that, I think more time in the garden because everything is growing and blooming and I haven't seen the rats that I mentioned last week.
That's good. No rats.
No rats. So here's to a rat-free weekend. That is all we have time for on Startup 360 today. I do want to say a huge thank you to James for helping produce this week's show. It is a Smart Co media production. Don't forget to like what we do on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple, or wherever you find your podcasts. Thanks to you.
Thanks to you.
I don't thank you enough
No,
every week for the amazing work that you do, but really appreciate it. Thanks to everyone at the private media team who helps make this happen. We'll see you next Friday. Have a great weekend. Bye for now.